Okay, so the subjects I'm going to talk through with you are the rest of the social sciences department. So history, geography, English language and English literature. Now, the thing to note about history, geography and English literature are that they are facilitating subjects. So if you are looking at applying to a Russell Group University, they are certainly subjects to consider. Because they sort of have that slightly more academic weighting behind them alongside the likes of all the science subjects, maths and computer science. Now, for those of you who've just joined and didn't see the previous presentation, I'll just run through some of the key aspects of the social science department again. We have got some excellent facilities. We are based social sciences within the Academy building, which is a large building which has got the library sort of based underneath us on the ground floor, which is a fantastic facility with huge amounts of computer access, sort of online learning facilities. There's a huge number of online books and things that you can access now as well. Within the social sciences department then, particularly in the subjects of history, geography and the English subjects, we have got a dedicated member of staff that is assigned to each of those subject areas. So there is a specialist A-level history teacher, and that is the predominant thing that is on their timetable. Same with English and geography. So you will be being taught by a subject specialist who is extremely knowledgeable and also extremely passionate about their particular subject area. The other thing that we pride ourselves on is the fact that we do have small group sizes. So that means that we are able to set those high expectations, build really good relationships with the students that we're teaching, and as a result, we do achieve some outstanding outcomes for our learners. Within the department, we also try and offer a range of different enrichment activities. And underneath it all, we just want learners to go and gain the best possible qualifications they can to ensure that they go on to sort of fulfill their aspirations, whether that be higher education, high level apprenticeships, or out in the world of work. So in the past sort of 2 years, so certainly since the A-level subjects have changed, since we saw the new A-levels come in, we have had 100% pass rate across the 4 subjects that I'm talking about now. We also have some extremely high outcomes for our students. So for example, for the last 2 years, over 60% of the students in A-level geography have gained what they class as a high grade, so A star to B. So we're very proud of those achievements, and it does sort of show the fact that we have got these subject specialists who want to gain those excellent outcomes for their students. So 87% of our students last year went on to a positive destination, so that was either into higher education or into some further education or training. 42% of our students went on to a Russell Group University, which again is a significant achievement and something that we're very, very proud of. Within our enrichment then, both history and geography are sort of subjects that lend themselves to being able to try and get students out to actually study them. So last year we did our first tour of Iceland in 2019. I actually ran that trip. It was absolutely fantastic. It was certainly a country that I've always wanted to visit, and I can't wait to be able to for the situation to improve so that I can start planning our next Iceland extravaganza. We did all of the tours and sort of saw all the sights of Iceland. It really was a very, very good trip. Similarly, we've had a long history of running sort of tours of Germany and Poland, again visiting sort of important historic sites and so on, and that is something that, again, once this situation improves, we would certainly want to be reinstigating. As well as that, within English, we do try and take students to sort of experience different drama plays or performances within theatres. We think it's really important. So where the opportunity arises, we will sort of get students to go and participate in those. Recently, they have been taking part in virtual visits of the London's Old Vic. So certainly, we have tried to be inventive during this lockdown period and give students those enrichment activities still. We also try and get students to sort of broaden the horizons and make sure that they're fully engaged with sort of their next steps after college. So we have taken students to open days at Manchester University, Leeds University, and then also to the apprenticeship and higher education fair in Leeds. So they were all trips that we did last year in 2019. As well as that, we have also participated in the Realising Opportunities programme, which is hosted by the Sutton Trust. And this is a way of trying to get students, when they first start with us in year 1 or year 12, to engage with higher education. And they can participate in these programmes. And they do get sometimes offers, lower university offers, as a reward for participating and completing these programs. We also offer within social sciences something called the extended project qualification, and this is an additional qualification that sits alongside your A-level provision. It is basically a research project of your choosing. So it could be a dissertation, it could be a piece of fieldwork that you undertake, or it could be actually a project where you actually create something. But it is where you go through the steps of producing an outcome. And so you plan it, you research it, and then you produce the finished outcome, whether that be a dissertation or an actual physical object. It is the process that you go through that you are examined, well, that you're not examined, but you are awarded grades for. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we talk a little bit about each of the different A-level subjects now. So the first subject I'll look at is A-level history. Now, all of the A-levels that I'm going to talk about now comprise a 20% piece of coursework. So they're all 80% exam and 20% coursework. In A-level history, the majority of your assessment is in 3 exams at the end of year 2. So you have paper 1, which you will mainly study in the first year of your A-level programme, which is all about the history of Germany. And it looks at German history from the end of World War I right the way through World War II into the sort of aftermath of World War II, where you ended up with the separation of Germany into East and West Germany, right up until it becomes unified again with the collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Paper 2, you also mainly study during year 1, and this is where you look at a history of fascist Italy. So again, the time period sort of begins around World War I, and it runs through to the end of World War II. And so within that, you do a great deal of study into the sort of rule of country under Mussolini, and sort of the fascism within Italy. The last paper, paper 3, you look at during year 2, and this covers quite a large period of time. So the British experience of warfare. So within there, you will study the Boer War, you study the Crimean War, and you also study World War I. And you look at how warfare changed over time. And within that, you look at the experiences of the British people, the soldiers, and how sort of these different experiences shape the society that we're in today. And this can link into your coursework. Now, your coursework is, like it says there, it says a 4,200 word dissertation. It's like a research project. It comes in 2 slightly different components. You will have to conduct some research and look at some sources of history surrounding. You do have a choice over what you want to do. Most students either look at the British experience of warfare, particularly the Crimean War, or they choose to look at the Holocaust, and they produce a written account looking at source evaluation and sort of source analysis, which are really important skills within A-level history. So like I said at the beginning, the content of the subjects is the easy bit. So actually learning the history is the easy bit. being able to interpret that history, look at different sources of information, formulate judgments and arguments, by analysing what those sources tell us. That is the skill in in A-level history. Okay, so next slide. Or did we want to pause for questions at that point? Okay, I'll look at English language and then I'll see if there's any questions that have come up. So English language is very different to GCSE English language. So if you are interested in the English language and how language has developed and changed and things, then this is the course for you. I know that sort of at GCSE English language sort of gets done to death a little bit, and students are sometimes very put off English language. But actually, if you've got a genuine interest in the subject, I would highly recommend that you do an A-level in English language, because it is really interesting, and it's not just about creative writing and sort of the things that you maybe have looked at in GCSE. So in year one, the topics that you will study is very much about the history of the English, well, sort of like how the English language has developed over time. So you start off by looking at individual language differences. So things like regional dialects, looking at how the language was different in different periods of time and how it's developed over those times. We look at then how sort of like the texts that you read are shaped. So things like your formal written pieces, as opposed to sort of magazine articles and so on. So you look at those different language skills and how they are used around us. Within that, though, you also look at the different language that can be used to represent different genders. And technologies and so on. So there's an awful lot in year one where you are looking at the mechanics of the English language, how we use it, how it is around us, and the different sort of purposes that it serves. In year two, this is where you start to focus a little bit more on specific areas of the English language. So that a large chunk of the work that you do in year two actually looks at language acquisition. So how children learn to read and write, where they gain their language skills from, and sort of understanding how that sort of develops as they move through the age groups. So you do a lot of work sort of looking at things like children's books and looking at the difference between a child's book for a very young sort of child compared to one that when they first get to school, and then you move on into sort of like the later key stages and how those language skills improve over time. Within year two, you will also do your coursework. So within your coursework, you will study different sources of written text, and you will look at the purpose behind them, how the author of those texts has used different language skills to get their point across and to develop the item that they have produced. There are two exams then in A-level English that accompanies the course. So you have paper 1 and paper 2. We actually study the AQA A-level English exam. So that is the exam board that we do if you want to do any further research into English language. Okay, then moving on, English literature. So English literature is a very different course to English language. So whereas English language, you are looking at that language development and how we use language, in English literature, you are looking at pieces, you are looking at texts. So across the course, you will be looking at a range of different plays, novels, and poetry. Again, you will have 2 exams at the end of year 2. So the first exam is focused on aspects of tragedy, which is a 2.5 hour exam. You will then have your second exam, which is looking at social and political protest writing. which is 3 hours long. So for the first exam, which is about aspects of tragedy, you study, the first thing you will study when you start in year 1 is Death of a Salesman, which is a play. You will then go on to study some poetry. So you will look at John Keats, and then you study Shakespeare. So you study the play Othello, and they make up paper 1. Paper 2 is the social and political protest writing. So in there you will study 2 novels, which you do a comparison of. So you will be studying a novel called The Harvest, and you will be comparing that in the exam to The Handmaid's Tale. So I don't know if any of you have seen the Channel 4 sort of series drama that was on, that was a bit of a remake of The Handmaid's Tale. So you will look at both of those. You will then also look at poetry by William Blake. Now, in year 2, you do 2 pieces of coursework. The first piece of coursework is where you argue you look at the literary canon, and you select a text that is either in or not in the literary canon. If it's not in it, you argue why it should be in there. If it is in it, you create an argument to justify why it should remain in the literary canon. But you need to read that text, so that gives you some choice. And this is where you will broaden your English literature studies, because you will have that choice over what text you want to study for your coursework. The second piece of coursework is focused on poetry, and you will be looking at a series of different poetry pieces, and you can either create your own poetry piece and produce a piece of coursework justifying and explaining those choices, or you can actually analyze other people's poetry and you produce your coursework surrounding that. And then finally, we have got A-level geography. Now, I am the A-level geography lecturer at the college, so that's why I put this one last, so that I didn't get too carried away and spend all my time just talking about geography. So for those of you who are, geography sort of sits in the middle of science and the social sciences. So on the diagram I've got there, you have got very much in A-level geography, you've got a 50-50 split between the physical topics and the human topics. Now, the one thing I will say about A-level geography is if you enjoy GCSE geography, then you will love A-level geography, because it goes into all of those topics that you've done at GCSE in a little bit more detail and a little bit more context. One thing I should have said before when I was talking about history, though, if you have not done GCSE history or you have not done GCSE geography, please don't think that is a barrier to you being able to study those subjects at GCSE. It's not. We take everything back to the beginning because we've got students that have come from different schools. They may have covered different topics at GCSE, different exam boards. We take everything back to the beginning. So you will study all of these topics from scratch. That means, therefore, that if you haven't done the GCSE in them, you are not at a disadvantage. You will have all of the input that you need during your A-level studies. And we do have students, a number of students that start history and geography with no GCSE background, and they are very successful. So please just bear that in mind. So in terms of the course then in geography, paper 1 then, on the left hand side, that is the physical geography paper, and that makes up 30% of your final grade. So in year 1, we cover the topics of tectonic processes and hazards and coastal landscapes in paper 1. We then go on into year 2 into the more complex geography. The first year content is basically building on what you've done at GCSE usually. So you probably will have a little bit of prior knowledge of some of these things. In paper 2 in year 1, we look at globalization, and then we go on to look at regenerating places. Globalization underpins everything in geography. So all of these topics link back to globalization in one way or another. So it's very important that we get to grips with that early on in year 1. In year 2, this is where you will come across, for those of you who have done GCSE, newer content. And these are things that you will be less familiar with. So the physical geography units, they do have science within them. So a bit like with A-level psychology, if you've got a knowledge in science, particularly chemistry, biology, it will stand you in good stead in geography. If you wanted to go on to do a BSc, a physical geography degree at university, I would strongly recommend that you do core maths, because within geography there is quite a lot of statistical analysis that you will undertake in a degree course. We will do some statistics at A-level, but pretty straightforward statistics. But certainly if you wanted to go and do a degree in geography, it is worth bearing in mind that core maths would help you greatly with that. The final topics in year 2, and I'm a physical geographer, but these are my favourite topics, are superpowers and health and human rights. And within this, we look within superpowers at how the power structure of the world has changed over time. So we look at, sort of go back to the British Empire, and we look at the ways that the British became the most powerful country in the world, and how the tactics have changed. So, you know, we used a lot of hard power, sort of colonial rule in the past, whereas then we moved into the Cold War, which is where we started to see more in the way of propaganda and brinkmanship, whereas now we see much more soft power tactics, and it's not just about military might, although that is still important. Now this links in massively well with what is happening in the world at the minute, and looking at the power struggle that seems to be taking place between the USA and China, and the impact that coronavirus could have on the USA's power and influence. So what I always try and do is to bring what we're learning back to what is happening in the world around us at the moment. Within geography, we do try and get out and do field work, both in the local area, but also sort of in the wider area. Now, obviously with the current restrictions, that has been a bit limited, but you know, it is my intention that under normal circumstances, we would get out and do field trips to the coast when we are looking at coastal landscapes. When we're doing regeneration, we'll go and look at Leeds and all the different projects that have taken place to try and regenerate Leeds. When we're doing the regeneration topic, we also go and look sort of around the local area, so Selby and the different areas of Selby, and sort of the differences that we see in the built environment around us. And that links us into then the last 20%. So that the Unit 4 is the coursework, the independent investigation. And this is a piece of field work where you will basically pick a topic that interests you, an investigation that you want to do in geography. So it could be a physical investigation, it could be a human investigation, but you will plan that investigation from start to finish. So you will come up with your own research question, you will go out, you will collect data on that research question, you will present it, and you will find the answer in that way. So in terms of skills and research methods, this is where it links back to psychology and sociology, and the research skills that you would develop in those subjects. The final part of the geography exam is paper 3, which is really hard to explain, but it is basically a synoptic investigation. So you get given a piece of information, a booklet of information about either a place or an issue in geography. And the issue is rooted in the information, the knowledge that you've gained from paper 1 and paper 2. So it will be in 3 of the topics across those papers. And what the aim of this paper is to see if you can connect together the different elements of geography, which sounds horrendous, but actually is the paper that students, I've always found, that I teach do the best on. And it's because the whole way through geography, we try and connect together the different topics. So it's sort of paper, if you study and learn paper 1 and paper 2 well, paper 3 sort of takes care of itself, because you're given a lot of information in the paper 3 exam. And that is sort of those 4 subjects in a nutshell. So if there's any questions, please.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, so just going back to the trips that you mentioned, somebody said, I'm worried that the cost of the trips abroad will be quite a lot. Can I get help with this?
We have had in the past sort of, we do have bursary funds for students who are at the college who are maybe from a disadvantaged background. The bursary is there to support you in whichever way you want. So if you want it to help you, to support you in sort of accessing overseas residentials, then I think that is something that the college can certainly look into. The one thing I will say is if we do plan any overseas trips, we always try and give students a lot of notice. So before I took the group to Iceland in 2019, which was February 2019, I actually started planning that trip around Christmas of the year before. So the students actually had a full 12 months to save up. Many of the students had part-time jobs, and they actually just paid off little bits themselves over the course of the year. So actually, although overseas trips are not cheap, it certainly it helped for them to be able to make it affordable.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And then Tilly asked, can you accommodate everybody's different subject combinations? For example, somebody who wants to take chemistry, biology, and English literature.
Yes, I mean, normally what we do is that the way that we divide up so it's a bit like when you have your options choices at school, at GCSE. So you will have sort of different choices that you can take out of different options. The thing with the subjects that you've just mentioned is that they do appear in more than one grid. So usually we will be able to accommodate most students' subject choices. As I say, sometimes there is there are things that we need to consider, but on the whole, we will be able to accommodate your subject choices. And if you wanted to do something like extended project qualification, that is additional. So that is where you would just get a mentor. So you wouldn't have a set lesson in that as such. You would arrange one-to-one sessions with your mentor who would guide you through that process.
Brilliant. And the final question is actually about the EPQ. So I would like to do English language at university. Should I be doing the extended project qualification?
The extended project qualification is open to any students from any subject combinations. So we actually have quite a few that do an EPQ from science, because if they actually do an EPQ and they do the dissertation option and they're a scientist, it sort of proves that they can write an essay and construct an argument. But I mean, my advice with the EPQ is once you get into college and you see how you are managing on your A-level program, because A-levels are difficult, they are challenging. I actually think that they're the biggest jump in education that you will ever take. So the jump from GCSE to A-level is far greater than the jump from A-level to degree. And that's why sort of it's a sort of slightly smaller step. So when you start at the college in year one, if you find that you are coping with your A-level options well, you feel that you're managing the workload, and that you've actually got a bit of time that you could devote to an EPQ, then yes, do the EPQ. It certainly will look good in the eyes of a university. However, if you are finding that you are all your time is taken up and that you've got a lot of study that you're trying to put in for your chosen A-level subjects, I wouldn't advise that you do an EPQ on top of that, because actually the universities will be looking at the grades you get in those A-level choices first. The EPQ is like an added bonus. So you don't want to do an EPQ at the detriment of your A-level choices. It should be there to complement them and to support.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's all the questions. Thanks, Karen.